Guitarist Denis Taaffe, and I'm in my home studio, and I want to welcome you to the making of my 329th album. The name of that album is Modern Rock Guitar Vol.329, Volcanic Audio. And for those who are familiar with my music, basically, I'm an electric guitarist who plays electric guitar and also uses loops done on the fly. And that basically means that as I'm playing, I record little pieces of what I'm playing and let it repeat, and then I layer ideas on top of that. All of my tracks are improvised on the spot out of the two amplifiers here. In this particular case, I was using two Black Star HT Club 40 amplifiers in stereo, so left and right. And basically what you hear is exactly what came out of my speakers and was recorded. As I said, all the tracks were improvised on the spot. Okay, and so I don't add any overdubs over that at all. And originally this album started out as basically 5 really long tracks, and eventually I had to edit them for various reasons, from hitting wrong notes to things that were maybe too repetitive or too darn long. It just depends. Now real quick, we'll talk about the album cover. And the album cover is basically a public domain photo that I used. I added, there's a volcano erupting, obviously, and so I added little pictures of me and guitars being blown out of the volcano. Okay, now this being my 329th album, I definitely wanted to try some different sounds that I hadn't tried before. And this very first track is called Magma Chambers, Part 1. And for Magma Chambers, I used some sounds that I had created via FX pedals and so on. They're highly reverberated, almost like being in a cave. And by layering these things, it gives you almost kind of a medieval sound, if there's such a thing. It's not quite modern sounding. Anyway, let's take a listen to that. That's track 1. Okay, and it's track 1 is about 5 minutes and 55 seconds long, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. Yeah. So a lot of these sounds have a lot of reverb on them, giving the album a lot of depth. And that was the idea with this here. That sound right there is pretty much the main guitar, and that is a harmonized guitar using a pitch shifter. So it's playing an original note and then a harmonized note on top of it. On top of that, there's a layer of guitar. I like to call it a cello sound, because it's exactly what it sounds like, kind of like a cello. It's kind of a real low sound. And then on top of that, a layer of guitar with a lot of reverb, giving it depth as if it was being played in a cavern. And so, as I'm playing these and layering them, I'm listening, and real quickly trying to come up with parts that fit well with what I'm hearing, to maybe add a layer. And by that way, you can control which direction it goes musically and what it sounds like as well. Yeah, to me this doesn't sound very modern. It's kind of a, yeah, to me it sounds like a, you know, a sound from the Middle Ages almost. Kind of mysterious as well. Like something's maybe bubbling up, you know. Keep in mind, a lot of my music is film music, or inspired by films, if you like. And I can see them being used as a soundtrack to certain, you know, parts in a film, that kind of thing. Okay. So that's the intro track. And it goes on from there, you know. I put more ideas on it here. I should tell you right off the bat, too, that when I'm skipping around here, going track by track and cutting the track, what is missed in that, which is probably the strongest point of the whole album, and it's a real shame that these get cut up into single tracks, you know, saying, oh, well, this song's good, but this one's not. Because this album, in particular, has certain themes, you know, but also the tracks are run very smoothly one into another, and it gives you a really pleasant listening experience from the beginning of the album to the end of the album, you know. Gosh, I remember just the other day, I wanted to take a listen to it before I, you know, put it out completely. And I was just working on my computer, and the whole album had gone by, you know, and I barely noticed that, because it was very smooth, and each track, you know, complemented the last track. So, okay, well, let's move on to track number 2. Now, for track number 2, it's a longer track. It's 7 minutes and 54 seconds. So let's take a listen to that one. Okay, now here I'm going for atmosphere, moods and atmosphere, right? So this is where I have harmonics, right? There, we got that little Jimi Hendrix kind of, you know, hammer on and pull off there. Yeah. And there I did it up near the top as well. Did a Jimi Hendrix hammer on pull off. We're going and then you also hear 2 chord voicings being repeated, and the harmonics over that. And then I also emulate bass on guitar, using pitch shifters and things, make it sound like a bass. So here I've got a bass line going as well. Here comes a guitar with a repeating pattern. Those kind of subtle. So this reminds me very much of kind of a dark mood or atmosphere with a lot of tension, you know, which would be really good in many films. Okay, and let's fast forward a bit, because here I'm basically building up the track. So here at 5:08, let's do that one. Okay, now here's that pattern playing with the delays. Yeah. Okay, now here was very interesting. What you heard there, this kind of sound that comes and goes. You'll hear it here. And what that is, it's a chord voicing, and I tapped the harmonic, and then looped it and played it in reverse. And that's where you get this. You'll hear it here. Right there, that's a reverse harmonics, tapped harmonics. There. And then beyond that, I also have a layer of just standard clean guitar, and I'm kind of playing fills there. This kind of track is really one of my favorite tracks because there's a lot going on, and yet it's very subtle. And I left a lot of space, it's not all crammed together. There's a lot of space in between the different parts. So you always notice something new. But overall, it creates a really kind of nice atmosphere that I like anyway. That I could hear in a film, certainly, in, psychological thrillers or drama films, who knows. Okay. Oh, and by the way, this track is called Viscosity. Okay. And so here I'm really trying to find all kinds of different parts that work together. From repeating patterns to double stops, fills, harmonics, and so on. Okay, let's move on to track 3, which is Gradients Part 1. And this is a very long track. It's actually 9 minutes and 3 seconds, and it used to be longer than that. And from what I recall from this track is I have completely different guitar parts playing at the same time, and yet somehow they seem to come together and kind of mesh together. And for that one, I wanted to make it sound more modern and definitely have this pattern playing. It's something I do where I play patterns and use a lot of delay. Guitar delays, syncopated in time, and then I loop layers of that together and you get some really interesting sounds. So let's take a listen to that. And this is a kind of happier mood and atmosphere than the previous one, which was a lot darker. I've got a repeating pattern, and then on the other side I've got just basically a repeating clean guitar part. And the clean guitar part has no effects on it. It's just, except for reverb possibly, but it's just a classic clean guitar with using the neck pickup. Yeah, so there you had the first part, and then the second part comes in, which is a dan 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 dan. Since it's such a long track, we'll fast forward it to the 4 minute and 15 seconds. Okay. Now here is a looped layer of reverse guitar right here, and it has very little reverb on it. It just gives it a different kind of sound, a little something's not quite right, you know, kind of an eerie-ish sound. Almost reminds me kind of an accordion or something. Okay. Let's fast forward that to the 8 minute 25 mark. There's another guitar part added on to the repeating patterns. So there's quite a few layers going on here. Yeah, and one of the big things was, again, two different guitar parts, completely different, meshed together, you know, and they create one thing, and they don't sound like, you know, two separate tracks. They sound like one together. Okay, number 4, Silica, Part 1. This is a fairly short track, the 3 minutes and 53 seconds. And this reminds me very much of the kind of rhythm playing you'd hear like on the Cars would play, you know. Yeah. So here you've got a constant, and then the bass part is changing. It makes it sound like two different chords, but it's really one chord and just the bass changing. And so of course I work on developing this. I had a bass line and then layered guitar on top of that. And notice here I'm trying to get the timing real precise, you know. I remember when I did this track, I hadn't really played in a couple days, and man, the first thing to go is your timing. So I was really working to get that back into shape, because I noticed I was kind of rushing at certain points. Okay. And there, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's an extra layer of guitar now. Yeah. Another rhythm. So all these are rhythmic ideas, I guess. Okay, let's go to the 2 minute 55 mark. There's some guitar coming in, layered guitar. And that has a delay and reverb on it as well. Yeah, I ended up really liking this track, and it definitely got my rhythm playing into shape, which is what I really needed at the time. Okay. Alright. So that's the idea behind that one. Okay, now let's move on to track number 5, which is called Minerals. And track number 5 is another very long track, 11 minutes and 9 seconds. So let's take a listen to that one. So I really love those chord voicings, you know, especially some of them I hadn't played before. And notice the tempo has slowed down. And near the beginning, I'm actually playing the emulated bass on guitar, basically finding a bass line that then I loop. And when I play those chord voicings, if you listen closely, the reverb is actually quite big and it grows. And as it grows, it starts to modulate. And it leaves a trail, this modulated trail. It almost sounds like a keyboard, but you can't quite make it out. And there's my favorite keyboard emulation on guitar from that Eventide hot sauce algorithm. And I just really love that little synthesizer type sound, because it reminds me of very much film soundtracks, you know, early 80s and things, you know, kind of a primitive synthesizer. It's just creates a nice mood or atmosphere, and it reminds me very much of these kind of films. Okay, and if we fast forward it, let's see if I've come up with any other ideas for this track. Let's go to 6 minutes 34 seconds. Of course, repeating patterns here. Now this is the dotted eighth. No, you can hear it's a little faster than some of my other repeating patterns, which are slower delay-wise. And so there I'm creating layers of the keyboard parts, emulated keyboard, the repeating patterns, the bass emulation, the chord voicings, and so on and so on. There's kind of like that, a U2 kind of guitar part, the edge, you know, kind of that delayed, modulated, delayed, clean, chordal voicings there. Another thing I like about that track is the repeating patterns change according to the chords being played underneath it, you know, so it's not always the same pattern. It's actually changing, you know, the fingerings are different and so on. Okay, now we go to track 6, which is Gradients Part 2, and this is an extension of basically what was introduced in track 3. However, instead of track 3 was 9 minutes long, this one is just 3 minutes and 13 seconds. It basically gives you the essentials of the track, almost like a summary without going into too many details. You know, of the 9 minutes. So it's kind of a summary. Let's take a listen to that. And I like this track because I think the mood and atmosphere is kind of light. You know. So it's very subtle. It's not screaming in your face, you know. Remember, this is the one where I had 2 different guitar parts, trying to mesh them together. And there you can hear them distinctly. You've got a repeating pattern and then just a normal guitar playing as well. Okay. And there's, compared to the 9-minute track, is much more defined. You know, so I suppose this could be the single. You know, and the 9-minute would be the extended version. If you like. Okay, well, let's move on. Okay, and now we're at track 7, which is Magma Chambers Part 2. And remember, this is the medieval sounding one. And we had it on track 1 as the opening track. Okay, so let's take a listen to that. And same thing, this one is very short as well. In fact, it's less than 2 minutes. And let's take a listen to that. And here, same thing. It's a small version of track 1, if you like. And it takes that idea of those 2 notes, right, and then drops an octave and plays again. And it's switching between those two bass notes. So very similar sounds, except here you have the actual guitar, just standard guitar. It has quite a bit of reverb on it, but it's just clean guitar. Same thing, it's kind of a summary, you know, without going into extended detail that you heard on the first one. And it's much more defined now with that main guitar sound, which wasn't in the first track. Okay, let's move on to track 8. And track 8 is very similar to the others in the fact that it's an extension of track 4, and it's the same kind of thing. It's much more of a summary because it's a lot shorter. It doesn't go into extensive detail. However, it's much more defined, and you can hear it here. Those repeating patterns. It's really one of my favorite guitar sounds. Just because you can use different delay times and still have it synced to the tempo. Before, you know, before I had delays synced to the tempo, they would just sync to themselves, and I would try to make them fit. And of course they were. So I would try to make the delays fit, but since they were not synced to time, they were always off time, which is not the case here. And if you listen closely, there's actually a layer of delayed guitar, and then I'm also playing guitar and adding little fills and so on. Yeah, and there I'm adding the fills. That's that guitar. That sounds like it's in a cave, you know, like a huge reverb. So you've got one guitar in front, one in back to give it some depth. Gives it kind of a dreamy quality, if you like. Okay, and then track 9 is Cumulates. Right. And this track is very much trying out voicings. As I said, I keep learning new chord voicings with different fingerings and so on. So let's hear some of that. And this is about 5 minutes and 44 seconds. I think it's a good way to end the album. And it's a much slower tempo, and here you'll hear all these different chord voicings. So here, the second one is a half step down. And here I'm adding the emulated bass. So I really create a chord progression here from those chord voicings. And here I'm actually playing the bass guitar, on guitar. Trying to find a cool bass line for it. So I've got noodling a little bit. Trying to find that one that I can loop and then go on to other things. Other layers. Okay, now let's go to the 3-minute 31-second mark. Of course, I've added the repeating patterns. It's kind of like the glue that holds everything together. When it's changing the chord voices, I'm actually adding fills and double stops on clean guitar as well. And they're adding some little pentatonic lead lines. What I like about it is that it has so many layers, and yet it doesn't sound that way at all, because they kind of mesh together very well and still leave space within the track. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So, that is Modern Rock Guitar Vol.329. Volcanic audio. And the one thing I wish I could get across to you more than anything is how smoothly it changes from track to track. The truth is, the song shouldn't be isolated, pulled out of context. When you hear it from beginning to end, it's just very, very smooth. And this is the kind of album you can drive to, study to, sleep to, those kinds of things. And it really creates a nice, overall, relaxed mood and atmosphere. I suppose some of them are a little dark and serious, just like you would find in a film. on there. So I'm really pleased with this album, especially the musical ideas on there. Now, the next album is going to be volume 330, so I'm definitely going to be doing something different for that, you know, and I'm not trying to rush these albums, you know, just, it's surprising how they come about sometimes. This one, as I said, started out with just 4 tracks, really long tracks. That's why some of them are cut off, and then you have little summaries at the bottom, you know, kind of an extension of the original track, but with more defined but less detail, if you like. But boy, when you really, you know, when you listen to it from beginning to end, it's just a real nice experience. When you hear just one track, I mean, the track is fine, but you're kind of missing out on the overall feel of the album, you know. And because I remember asking myself, you know, I'd listen to one track and say, well, yeah, it's a decent track. You know, but then when you put it in context of the album, then you realize, wow, it really does make for a really nice album, you know, to listen to. And I'm afraid that that's getting lost in the translation. You know, and with these days, with, you know, things like Spotify and, you know, all of those, where they're doing one track at a time instead of albums. You know, I'm also very pleased with the sounds I got here. You know, so much so that there are sounds I'm starting to rely on, and so I definitely want to come up with some new sounds for the next album. You know. To me, each track is like a painting, you know, and each sound, guitar sound, is like a color, if you like, you know, like a, you know, painter, he doesn't just paint one painting, right? He has one painting, and it's either, you know, like Starry, Starry Night, or what have you, you know, which is blue, right? And so, but then take another painting of his, of Van Gogh, you know, and it's a lot of orange, or, you know, in a wheat field, that kind of thing. And I think, for me, my tracks are very much that way. They're very much, each one is like a painting, you know, with different sounds, and that kind of thing. The other thing to notice, I guess, is there's no soloing, really, you know, and there are some fills and things, you know, but it's not this distorted lead guitar sound, which is fun to do, but for this kind of album, you know, it's not very musical. And that's what I was going for, that overall. You know, and that's hard to do as a guitarist, because it's fun to do solos and say, well, you know, it's your chance to show, you know, technical skill and so on and so on. But once you let that go and you really concentrate on the musicality of it, it's worthwhile to do. That doesn't mean that I won't, you know, ever solo on an album again or what have you. But I realize now that it's not always needed, you know. And especially if you're doing it to, you know, to show off, you know, look what I can do, that kind of thing. You know, that kills it, for me, musically, you know. So this way I'm much more interested in the chord voicing and musical ideas, you know, that kind of thing, and then the guitar sounds as well. Alright, so that completes the making of volume 329. My first album was in 1999. So, and I remember 1 to 200 are my kind of rock albums, and then 200 to 329 are this kind of new style, much more film music. So I'm going to continue to do that, and then hopefully at some point mesh the two together. I think it would make for a really interesting album as well, and definitely for this next album come up with some new sounds as well, as I mentioned before, and hopefully that won't be too long from now. Alright, oh, by the way, the album's available at Amazon, Spotify, a bunch of others, for download. And I'm working on getting them on the CD, so that you can actually just buy a CD if you want to. That would definitely be through Amazon, I think. Well, we'll see. We'll see how that works out. Something to work on anyway. Alright, see you next time. Bye.